you get what you wanted for Christmas? I suppose the older we get, we don't make those lists anymore. And we don't give them to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa or out for Santa Claus or whatever you want to say, and wake up on Christmas morning and you're kind of going through the checklist as you look at the gifts under the tree and wonder if you're going to get everything you wanted. Maybe there's some years where you open a gift here and a gift there, and the one you really, really wanted wasn't there, and you're happy with what you got, but a little disappointed that you didn't get that big one, the one you really, really hoped for. But then that's where mom or dad goes, oh, I think there's another one. Where did he leave that? And oh, and there it is. There's the one you wanted, and you're just so happy, and you can't wait to play with it or do with it whatever you're going to do with it, and you can't wait to go to school and tell your friends about it so that they can enjoy it with you. When you get that gift you really, really wanted, whether it was a football or a doll or an instrument or a video game, whatever it might have been. Those are all nice, right? Physical, earthly gifts. You can enjoy them for a while, but you know, eventually they waste away, they wear away, you lose interest, you grow up, and you have different things you want. Imagine this gift. Put yourself in the position of a prisoner of war. You've been locked away for months. In fact, you've lost track of time. You don't have calendars, you don't have the news you can turn on. You're barely happy to eat, much less keep up with what's going on in the world around you. You're happy you live another day and aren't led away to your death. And you think it's kind of sort of December, around Christmas time, but like I say, you don't know. And as you're sitting there in tears, wondering what's going on back home, the prison door breaks open, and there's some U.S. soldiers telling you you're free. You're going home. Merry Christmas. Imagine the joy in your heart to get a gift like that. You're seeing images of your husband or wife, your kids, your parents, your friends, your home, the Christmas tree, the dinner you're going to have. Just one of the greatest gifts you could ever receive. Right? And you get there, and a big warm embrace and hugs and kisses, and everything, the way you pictured it, is exactly the way it was going to be. And you're on the phone, and they're on the phone because they're just as excited as you are. He's home, she's home. They were lost, but now they're found. Can't imagine a greater gift than deliverance from captivity. Deliverance to what could have been a certain death, away from all that you love, alone, dark, scared. Well, today in Isaiah chapter 52, we have to put ourselves back into the minds of the original readers. Captivity wasn't happening yet. Isaiah was prophesying about it, but it was coming. About 150 years after this was written, it was coming. In this case, it wasn't because they were out fighting a battle for their country and came up on the losing end of it. In this case, it was because they had decided to fight a battle against God. Decided to do things their own way and not listen to what Moses and God had said when they came down from the mountain. They had decided to take on other gods, the gods of those around them. They had decided they knew better. Their enemy was God. And God had told them, these will be the consequences if you choose not to follow me. Don't be surprised. And they'd agreed. They'd agreed that, oh, yeah, that's fine. We'll do it. We'll do all of it. We promise. Well, you remember the story if you know your Old Testament. They didn't keep their word. God kept his end of the deal, but they didn't. So off they went. 3 different waves to Babylon. The smartest, the strongest, the ones the Babylonians figured would be worth taking. You're coming with us. Prisoners of war, you could say. Others were left behind. But what were they left behind to? They had laid waste to the temple in Jerusalem. They'd laid waste to the land. You'd almost rather go off to Babylon. At least you had something to do. At least you had somewhere to live. You're left behind. Imagine Clover was just devastated, pulverized. What are you going to do here? Go find a cardboard box and live? Your house isn't there. Your place of worship isn't there. Your job isn't there. Ugh. Nothing but despair and darkness. But it's not like it was all roses for those who went off to Babylon either. You hear Psalm 137, one of those imprecatory psalms, and it talks about the children of Israel over in Babylon and how they wept by the rivers of Babylon. And how the Babylonians would mock them. Sing us a song about Jerusalem. Pull out your instruments. Give us a little ditty, right? You're just mocking. Imagine, we can't maybe appreciate it in our country because we're all free country, right? You can travel from border to border. Imagine Minnesota and Wisconsin are just hated enemies, like war enemies, not just rivals in sports, but just, and Minnesota comes over and takes us captive. And here we are off in Minneapolis, and you don't want to be in Minneapolis. Oh, this is the enemy capital. And sing us a song about Madison. Tell us about Milwaukee. And you can just picture Milwaukee devastated, on fire, in ashes, smoking. You can picture your church home, nothing left. Tell us more. Yeah, so they were just weeping by the rivers of Babylon, knowing what used to be and what they had lost. That's the context here. One day, children of Israel, this is how you're going to be. This is the position you're going to be in. But Isaiah is not all bad news. We know that many of the greatest prophecies of deliverance come from the book of Isaiah. You hear them at Christmas time, you hear them on Good Friday, you hear them at Easter time, you hear them throughout the church year. And in the last third of the book of Isaiah, we get these servant songs with a capital S. There's going to be a deliverer. Now it's interesting that the deliverer is called a servant. You'd think someone who's going to deliver their people is going to be a champion, a hero, a king, a warrior. A servant will come. Of course, Jesus' words come to mind right away, right? The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, to give his life as a ransom for many. At the beginning of Isaiah 52, we read verses 7 through 10 before, but the first two verses, here's what God says to his people. Awake, awake, O Zion. Zion, Mount Zion, Jerusalem, kind of the same picture. Clothe yourself with strength. Put on your garments of splendor, O Jerusalem, the holy city. The uncircumcised and defiled will not enter you again. Shake off your dust. Rise up. Sit enthroned, O Jerusalem. Free yourself from the chains on your neck, O captive daughter of Zion. Now you wonder, well, how's that going to happen, right? Especially to those who were hearing this from guys like Ezekiel and others as they were in captivity, and you're probably thinking to yourself, well, it sure doesn't look like it. Right? It sure doesn't feel like it. Well, how's this going to happen? What's going to be the great event that frees us from captivity? Well, like all of prophecy, you have maybe an immediate fulfillment, and then a longer-term fulfillment. And in 539, the Persians took over, and they wiped the Babylonians out, and they sent the Israelites home. Go back to Jerusalem. Go rebuild. But right here, the uncircumcised and defiled will not enter you again. It didn't last very long. The Greeks eventually came, and then the Romans came, and they were certainly considered uncircumcised and defiled. So there must have been something else, a greater deliverance God's talking about. And we get to verses 7 through 10. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news. Do you think feet are beautiful? Most people don't like feet. They think feet are ugly. Whether they're big or crooked, or you look at them and they're all calloused. Feet take a beating, right? We're always on our feet. Because they're the reason why people look at feet and say they're not the most beautiful part of someone's body. But here, how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news. Why? Because their feet are so attractive? Or their perfect shape or size? No, because of the message they have. You picture the messengers leading the way as the captives are coming home, and they have something to share. Well, what is it? They're proclaiming peace. They're bringing good tidings. They're proclaiming salvation. They're saying to Zion, your God reigns. Your God reigns, O Jerusalem. Again, try to picture if all of us states were at war with each other. Not the God of people in Minnesota, not the God of people in Iowa or Michigan or Illinois, all these other gods, the God of the state of Wisconsin, the God of Jerusalem, the true God, the Lord, the triune Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Your God reigns. It might not have looked like it. There was a while when it looked to all the other nations around you that your God hates you. Your God's punishing you. Your God's letting all that happen to you. That's not a God I want. But look what happened now. You've been delivered. You've been freed. Your God reigns. And God wanted to make very clear he reigned. He said the Lord will lay bare his holy arm. Getting ready for battle, right? Everyone's going to see it. In the sight of all the nations, and all the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. Listen. Your watchmen lift up their voices. Watchman must have been a boring job. I don't know if any of you have been a watchman for anything. Imagine sitting up there just watching. You can understand why watchmen fall asleep, right? Especially if there's nothing really going on. You grab a cup of coffee and you sit there and watch. An 8-hour shift. Watch. Every time I drive by the prison in Portage, I think about those. You see those towers. Imagine that job. Just watch. Well, today they're seeing something. And the watchmen lift up their voices. Together they shout for joy. When the Lord returns to Zion, they will see it with their own eyes. Burst into songs of joy together, you ruins of Jerusalem. Did you catch that? When the Lord returns to Zion? Isn't the whole point here that people are coming home? Isn't that what the watchmen are so excited about? They're back, and probably some family members of those who were left behind, right? Those who they figured weren't worthy to take off because they weren't good for their smarts, they weren't good for their muscles. But now there's going to be this family reunion. But the watchmen, what are they most excited about? The Lord's return. The glory of the Lord's coming back to his holy city, to his people, to Jerusalem. And they can't help but to lift up their voices because God's here. Okay, now it's Christmas 2014. And you say, well, we're not obviously in exile, and we're not enemies with Minnesota or Wisconsin or with Iowa or Michigan or whatever it may be. How does this apply to you and to me? Well, how many of our hymns use words like enslaved by sin and bound in chains? How many scriptures talk about things like fetters and dungeons of death and prison houses of sin? Yeah, there was a war. Somewhere between God's creation of the angels and Genesis 3, the fall into sin, Satan and those who followed him decided too they knew better than God. They rebelled, and they were kicked out. Hell was created for that very specific purpose, for the devil and his evil angels. We were never meant to go there. That wasn't for people. But the devil wasn't happy just with himself and the wicked angels there. He wanted to take prisoners with him. And it started there at the tree, and all mankind fell in Adam's fall. One common sin affects us all. We were all held captive by sin. We're all held captive by death. I don't care how young you are or how old you are. Death gets us all, and that's because the wages of sin is death, from little to big. But a deliverer came, the servant. And the watchmen see it, and the watchman's voice rings out, the Lord is returning. And that's the beauty of Christmas morning. The glory of the Lord shone around them. They were terrified at first. But what they hear, don't be afraid. I bring you good news. Great joy. Today in the town of David, a Savior has been born to you. He's Christ the Lord. The Messiah, the promised one, the one Isaiah was talking about, the one Ezekiel preached to them in Babylon about. Jesus is here. For you and for me. And it's public, right? All mankind will see God's salvation, John the Baptist said in Luke 3. I find it so comforting when Jesus says in Matthew that before the end of the world comes, the gospel of the kingdom will be preached to all nations, and then the end will come. That's a question that always comes up, in a new member class or confirmation class. What about the people who don't know? What about the parts of the world who don't have 1 million Bibles on the bookshelves if you go to Walmart or Target or the library or churches on every corner? What about those people? And Jesus makes a very specific promise. I am not coming back until the gospel of my kingdom has reached the ends of the earth. There will not be anyone who can say, I never knew, I never had a chance, it never came here. Very public. All the ends of the earth will see the salvation of our God. That's really comforting. So now, how do you consider the feet of those who bring you good news about this deliverance? I'm not the one who's told you this for the first time. You've heard it before. But think back. Maybe it was your parents or grandparents. Maybe it was a Sunday school teacher or a Christian day school teacher, maybe a pastor. Were they beautiful? To this day, do you still remember hearing about this whole Jesus story? When the whole concept of what happened in the manger really sunk in. And then you learned the rest of it. How it didn't just stop here at Christmas, but he continued on, and he lived that holy life, and he died that innocent death, and he rose again, and how that was all for you, specifically for you, in spite of you, in place of you. What beautiful feet. And maybe you never looked at their feet, but it wasn't their feet. It was the message they brought of good news, good tidings. Now for you, is there someone in your life that your feet can be beautiful to? I heard it said once, one of the greatest parts about going to heaven, and I say one of because obviously the greatest part is going to be sitting around the throne of the Lamb with all those who trust in him with us, and the perfect family reunion, right? No more family drama, no more issues, just a family of believers in perfection. But one of the greatest parts, people who are going to come up to you and say thank you. Thank you for having beautiful feet. And as a pastor, I get to do it all the time, and I don't know, maybe the line will be really long for me, but it doesn't mean it can't be long for you too. Thank you for living your faith and showing me Jesus every day. Thank you for saying Merry Christmas instead of Happy Holidays. Thank you for reminding me about what it's all about as you look around, and sometimes it's so easy to get distracted. Thank you for having such beautiful feet and not being afraid to proclaim those good tidings of great joy. I think we all have people who need to look at our feet. So that's our prayer this Christmas morning, right? There's a lot of POWs out there, or in darkness. But you and I, as messengers, as watchmen, we have beautiful feet because of the beautiful message to share. Today in the town of Dayton, the Savior has been born to you. God be with us until he comes again. Merry Christmas. Amen.